You've probably heard by now that Rolex acquired Bucherer, butchering the name. Um, However, what you might not be thinking about is what does this mean in the business terms? What does this mean for ADs? What does this mean for customers? What does it mean for the watch world in general behind just the big announcement? With me today, I have my buddy Shane, who is a master of marketing, also a previous attorney, and an avid Rolex collector and fan. So I figured who better to talk about this subject than somebody that is not only in the industry in a way, but also is a customer of the industry. Shane, how's it going today?
Really good, Abby. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. I love talking to you. I talk to you like 3-4 times a week already for other businesses that we do. Let's just add this time and talk about the subject at hand. Everybody yesterday created videos and released videos about this big acquisition. What does it mean? What does it do? What's the, what are the after effects or the shock waves of this, I guess, announcement? Me and you had a nice little conversation about what it could mean for the little guys, AKA, the smaller authorized dealers or the customers, or I guess collectors, enthusiasts, buyers of these watches. Now, none of us are experts. We are not, we don't come from that world, but we do have some sense in business, some sense in marketing, and you definitely have some sense in law, but more probably in marketing. I feel like you're a better marketer than you are a lawyer.
I'm definitely a marketer now more than a lawyer, for sure.
All right.
I was a pretty good lawyer, though.
You were a pretty good lawyer? For how long?
I think so. Just doing it for about 4 years, full time, just one, though.
Oh, okay. That's not bad. I thought you only did it for a couple months and you got tired of it and burnt out.
Like it was one year was enough for me
I gotcha.
to come back to marketing.
So just so everybody knows, Shane, and when I said you are a master marketer, you really are. I don't throw that around lightly. You are an amazing, partner for us to have, and you are probably 90% of the reason that Gray Market Magazine has achieved what it's achieved, and I'm very thankful for you for that.
Humbled by those words. Thanks, man. I said I'm humbled by those words. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. I practiced them for quite a while. Let's get into the topic at hand, and let's try to talk about it from an angle that's not covered in the media. Like I said, every outlet has covered this acquisition. A lot of it has been kind of like macro or micro, or just kind of like a bird's eye view of what this means. I want to get into, and a lot of this is going to be theory. We don't know for sure what's going to happen, but if any one of these things do happen, then we'll come out, as the ones that were right. So just to announce what happened, Rolex said that it has, acquired or made the decision to acquire Bucherer. So they are the second biggest retailer, of which probably 50% of their stores are Rolex Authorized Dealers. There's been a long-standing relationship between Rolex and Bucherer. The founder of Rolex and the founder of Bucherer have been like buddies, since, like the 1900s. And Bucherer has also been like an authorized dealer for 99 years. I mean,
since 2024. It's kind of nuts.
That's pretty significant.
It's a long-term partner, very, very ingrained relationship. You talk about like living memory.
Yeah.
That partnership's been around longer than anyone in these companies has been alive. So
now
crazy.
It's like it's the descendants of the founders. And the main reason that they're giving for this is the lack of a succession plan, that Bucherer, like the current owner, does not have any heirs to take over the business. And that's why Rolex, bought them.
Yeah, which seems kind of odd in and of itself, because you'd think that, there's a lot of different players that would want, to be chomping at the bit to try to get their hands on this, or at least make an offer, kick the tires. So it's pretty interesting that this came out like this. Obviously, we don't know whether other discussions were happening with any of the other big houses or big retailers. But I mean, this is a crazy, shocking move for Rolex that we can get into in a bit. It's for lots of reasons. I think it's important that we mention that there's about, from what we understand, like 1,700 to 1,800 authorized dealers that are licensed globally, meaning that these 53 retail locations represent about 3% of the number of global ADs.
Do you think that's a big number or a little number?
I think it's a small number. 3% is a small portion of, your available retailers. What we don't actually know is the volume of sales being pumped through those locations. So 3% of stores could represent 10, 15% or more of the actual sales. So that's one unknown that could have a big impact on, the value of this deal for Rolex, for Rolex's bottom line.
What I was thinking about, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I was thinking about the fact that, there wasn't any bidding war for this. Like imagine they just went to them direct and said, hey, we're thinking about selling because we have no heirs. How about private equity? How about, venture capital? How about any other potential buyer?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Like,
why are they going to make the decision just to sell it to one? It seems like, a competitive bidding process is much more likely to result in highest value. I mean, at this, they probably don't care. I mean, whoever's selling it, if it's, if they're probably going to make a lot of money anyway. They may not be too concerned about really squeezing the juice there. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It makes sense in the context of the relationship though. I think to some degree, I think it's just important to recognize, what kind of an impact this really was. And so, yeah, what's going to happen next, right?
Well, I mean, another thought that I had was like, was this, a plan in the works for a long time? Like, obviously there's the theories that, Rolex used Bucherer as their guinea pig for the CPO program. Like, how long back does this, plan, like how long ago did they come up with this?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk. This is a really nice segue. So Rolex is extremely tight-lipped about everything they do. We know that. But we also, if we know anything about Rolex, it's that they move really, really slowly. Yeah. Like they do not make drastic changes.
Correct.
It's their whole design, their business philosophy is incremental improvement. It's a big part of why the design cues are so universally recognized, why the brand has the status it does. And it's why the haters are groaning when new releases drop and nothing's changed. Yeah. But the exact same reason that the fanboys are like freaking out over, the thicker hour markers and whatever, these small, minute changes. And that's really what it's about. So like this acquisition is really shocking, as I said before, because Rolex has never been in the retail space. They specifically stayed away from the retail space. There's a lot of potential conflict that's created by this move. There's a lot of waves that could be made by this move. And it's, you'd have to think that they thought really hard about it like they do everything else.
Well, one of the things that, like I've mentioned before, was probably, I would say maybe 4 years ago, Rolex sent us, a notice to remove the word certified from our website, that we can now no longer use certified pre-owned. We could use pre-owned, but we can't use the word certified pre-owned. And we said, what do you mean? Like, why not? We certify that it's pre-owned. We didn't say you're certified. And then 3-4 years later, they come out with their certified pre-owned program. So it was like, okay, well, I just realized that's how long they've been working on this, and they, put the wheels in motion so long ago. So again, I'm assuming same thing happened here. This wasn't like, oh, look, we have this opportunity. They have no heirs. Let's buy them.
They're not moving that. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And like, that touched. So they must have been circumspect about this. They must have been careful about this, like they are about everything. And it likely was in the works for some time. And I think that interestingly, that same restraint, that same sort of strategic, slow pace from Rolex is what suggests to me that they're going to move slow and steady into the retail space. They're probably going to be cautious about rocking the boat. There's definitely been a lot of commentary out there about the impacts on different stakeholders, and we're going to talk through a couple of those. But I think that what this really does from a business lens is that it positions Rolex to capitalize on their brand in a way that they have not been able to before. And it also, interestingly, allows them to increase their margins without increasing production. And a lot of the discussion about how does Rolex grow is all about how do they make more watches? Well, we can't make more watches because we're going to be sacrificing quality. Well, collecting on that retailer's margin that you're currently giving away is a pretty good way to increase your revenue without actually increasing the number of sales sales of watches.
Of course. There's a lot of conversation about the fact that this is a way for them to really take ownership of their entire distribution model. And if it continues, and again, there are many theories, and ours is one of them, that potentially, Watches of Switzerland is next. Wempe is next. Any big, authorized dealers or anybody with multiple locations could, either, be given the option of become a Rolex boutique or, get bought out. It's
The option,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's the interesting thing is like Rolex has a tremendous amount of power in respect of its ADs. I mean, it sets the rules. And so, yeah, I mean, I would be a little bit apprehensive. I think we're going to talk about this a little bit. I'd be apprehensive if I was an AD right now. You got to imagine that press release that came out, there's probably more communication going out to the authorized dealers, presumably, to let them know, hey.
Have you seen any of the memes for Watches of Switzerland?
No.
Like this morning, we were looking at a bunch of memes of like, I forgot his name, but the current, like the CEO of Watches of Switzerland. Have you seen that meme where the kid has like the veins popping out of his head? Like he's like, that's him this morning. Or there was one where like the guy's like sweating and like sitting at breakfast. Like there is
You're
a lot of
shitting yourself. Yeah.
I mean, their stock is down by like 27%. What we do know is that the deal is not done yet. There is some, I guess some investigation has to go into place whether this will create a monopoly or whether this is like
yeah, we could talk a little bit about that. I thought that was like maybe an interesting angle. Now, I'm not a lawyer right now. I'm not a practicing lawyer right now, and I'm definitely not a Swiss lawyer. I was never a competition lawyer, but I did a little bit of research so I can share what I understand. Basically, in the press release, Rolex said that the transaction still has to be approved by competition authorities. And basically there's the Swiss act called the Cartel Act. And when one company is buying another company and the purchase price is over a certain amount, there's a threshold reached. They need to notify the Competition Commission, who at that point, if that threshold has been reached or exceeded, they need to do a review. So that initial review, if it shows that the merger might create or strengthen a dominant position in the particular market, they decide whether they need to launch an investigation. And that has to happen within a month of the notification. So it's not clear to me, whether the press release came out and then that starts the month. Maybe we're talking about, maybe the merger's been in the works for a while, and that'll be a shorter period of time if they notified earlier. But it's at most a month. So we're going to hear about whether the transaction was approved or whether a further investigation is required. If there is a further investigation required, that process can be up to 4 months. And what they're looking for is to see whether a dominant position was created or strengthened. In fact, so remember the first one is, might it be created or strengthened? Then they're going to go and look at the test and say, well, has it been created or strengthened? And does that eliminate effective competition? Now, I have no idea what the legal tests are and whether or not that's going to be the case. We are not, we don't have all the relevant facts. But, when you think about it, there's a lot of very large Swiss watch brands out there. There's a lot of really big luxury houses. Rolex is certainly the king, but they're not the only player of significant size by any means. And unless, Rolex's ownership of, Bucherer makes it impossible for all the other houses to compete, I can't imagine it's going to be an issue. Don't really, not making a call on this, but I think this will probably go through.
Given what we know about Rolex's meticulous nature, it's very likely that they would not have even, done this unless they had, almost guarantee that everything will pass.
Yeah, it would be embarrassing for sure.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, I'm sure that they have the ins and they know who to talk to. They've probably already started a process long before the press release.
There's probably not going to be an issue here, right?
No. I mean, is there another example that you could think of where the manufacturer owns the distribution? I mean, Tesla is the only one that I can think of right now. Like Tesla will not take
there's
independent.
Tons. It's vertical. Any vertically integrated company, like every like Apple. Apple manufactures its own products and sells them in its own stores.
But you could buy Apple at like Best Buy. You could buy Apple.
Sure, but that'll be the case for Rolex for sure, right? And I guess from a technical corporate law perspective, these are going to be separate. Completely, these are separate entities. But the fact that they're separate entities, only means so much given the state of the market right now, and that's sort of like a really interesting point here.
I mean, so we really know nothing about this. We don't know if they purchased the real estate. We don't know anything. We just know that they purchased the company and that the company will be operating independently, or so they say.
Yeah, I'd actually want to look back at the the press release to confirm. But yeah, it doesn't say.
It says they will not be changing the name and that they will continue to operate independently.
And they're keeping all the employees. It's likely like a share deal. I'm not sure, but it looks like they're taking the whole thing, kit and caboodle.
I wanted to talk about, what we think will happen next. But before we get into that, obviously the first thing is nobody fucking knows. However, there is something that I saw in, some of the coverage on this is the fact that Bucherer has already removed the Omega brand from its online listing of brands.
Whoa, I did not hear that.
No.
So this is really,
I mean, their biggest competitor is no longer on the list.
Okay, so let's talk about Rolex's stated justifications for the purchase in their press release. The first one was they said it's the best solution for Rolex's own brands. Interesting. We just talked about how they're going to be moving down the value chain. Pretty good for the brand to be able to, swallow up that entire retailer's margin, which we understand to be 30 to 40%, something like that.
Yep.
They say that it's the best solution for all the watch and jewelry partner brands. Presumably, this is referring to all the brands that Bucherer carries, like, the LVMH brands and the Richemont brands. But
how so?
I mean, Omega may not feel that way if it is in fact the case they were pulled off.
Well, think about it like this. Okay, now take Patek Philippe, take Audemars Piguet. Bucherer is an authorized dealer or a retailer of those brands. Does Rolex say, you know what? Nah, let's get rid of them? Or do those brands say, you know what? We don't want to be, selling our products inside Rolex's house. Let's pull those brands from Bucherer. Like, what's going to happen there is obviously, up to anybody's guess, but these are serious issues, especially if Omega is really no longer going to be offered at Bucherer.
They may be very serious issues for Bucherer. I mean, really, yeah. If it's, we'll have to confirm this, but I mean, if it is the fact, then whatever percentage of sales that Omega is making or any of these other brands are making up of Bucherer's top line, then that's going to be at risk, right? And they must have considered that it was going to be at risk. And if it is at risk, it may force Rolex's hand to do things that they otherwise wouldn't have to do. It's interesting. The last thing that they say is that it's the best solution for the employees of the Bucherer Group. So presumably what that is referring to is that if there was a different acquirer in the same line of business, they'd come in, they'd be looking for synergies, they'd get rid of any redundant functions. So they already have a marketing team, they get rid of marketing. They already have head office functions, they get rid of that, whatever,
But if you think about, let's just take marketing as an example. Who has the world's best marketing team?
I mean, that's an interesting question about Rolex, isn't it?
It's very likely Rolex.
But a lot of people would argue that Rolex doesn't. What
do you mean?
It's very simple, very simple marketing, right?
It's very simple, but very effective.
Yeah, no doubt they're the most successful.
They are top 3 most known brands in the world, along with Coca-Cola and I don't know, let's say Apple. I have no idea.
They're a big one. I don't know what the
Think about how many people know the brand Rolex compared to how many people know the brand Bucherer.
There's literally not even.
So who would you want running the marketing going forward?
No, yes, but the marketing function for the retail is different than the marketing function for the, at the top level, corporate level, right? There's still going to be the corporate level supporting the retailers, all of their authorized dealer network. And then, there's going to be the in-store marketers. Maybe there will be a few redundancies, but I guess what they're saying is it's best solution for the employees because if another retailer came in, there'd be a lot more functions. We have to remember that Rolex doesn't have any retail operations now, so they need everything Bucherer has presumably to continue operating.
But so think about it like this: if Apple wanted to sell their products at Best Buy, who would they have design the booths? Would it be Johnny Ive, who's designed the iPhone and everything else? Or would it be a Best Buy employee that works in their marketing department? You're going to get the best of the best.
Fair enough. And I'm sure there'll be support and integration, between Rolex and Bucherer if they continue, if what they're saying in their press release is true, for sure. My
thoughts are on this, on the long-term effects is that it's going to happen that every Bucherer location is ultimately going to become a Rolex boutique. They're going to sell Rolex, they're going to sell Tudor, nothing else.
Yeah, it's very possible. It is very, very possible it'll go that direction. I think another really, one thing to add to that is that it may, that's what may happen to the Bucherer stores. If you're right that the brand is so powerful that they say we don't need Bucherer for anything other than their actual operations, their actual leases, their locations, and their know-how in retail, we're going to slap our brand on it, which is the more powerful brand. What's going to happen to the other ADs? Because there's a major.
We're already assuming there's going to be like some crazy bias towards the smaller ADs.
What happens right now? There aren't enough Rolex to go around. Who decides who gets the Rolexes? Who decides who gets what Rolexes?
It's based on your size. So if you have one location, you're allocated a certain amount of watches per year. If you have 2, 3, 4 locations, you're allocated more.
Is that in the contract, you think? Is that in the AG contract?
No, it's definitely not in the contract.
That's completely at Rolex's discretion.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rolex now stands to make 30 to 40% more revenue from every watch sold through a location that it owns within its corporate
Where
group.
are those watches going to go?
Where are the watches going? Who's getting the watches?
Let me think. I'll make 30 or 40% less, but I'll keep my small AD happy. Or I make 100% of the profit, probably more, by sending it to my company-owned boutiques.
Let's talk about more. What does this do for Rolex in the real way? Okay, so they can make 100% of the sales revenue on their new watches. Okay, that's really cool. They're going to go foray into retail. Fucking awesome, Rolex. Mm-hmm. What about the actual value? What about the secondary market? The actual value that's out there. You think about the new Rolex market. The secondary market's like this. Mm-hmm. It's huge in comparison. And they're going to be, they now control, like they've always controlled the CPO program. They are now going to control the stores that have the most CPO programs launched, and they're going to make all of the money. It's kind of crazy because when they announced the program in December 22, the thought was, okay, like Rolex is seeing what's going on in the market. They want to make sure that their ADs aren't, being left out. They want to reduce the likelihood that ADs are going to be selling stuff through the back door. They're like, okay, let's throw the ADs a bone. Let's give them the ability to participate in this value that they're missing out on. Yep. Why shouldn't we? Right? That seemed like what the justification was. Yeah. But now, it looks different, right? Yeah. In retrospect, it looks different.
I had a conversation this morning with Roman where, I had like a realization. I was like, we're one of the biggest, watch dealers from the public, and we're, on our way to become the world's biggest. That's like our goal, to be the biggest watch buyers from the public. I said, well, what if this whole move really throws, a wrench in our entire program by Rolex saying, okay, well, our CPO watches are already selling for 30% more than secondary market, prices. Let's take a watch, $10,000. Let's say it's a sub. We would sell it for 10. Rolex, CPO would be 13. Again, just random numbers. Why wouldn't Rolex, through their CPO program and through their retailers say, guys, we now want you to offer 10 to 15% above market for the watches that you're going to be buying from the public? So that instead of them going to us, Luxury Bazaar, gray market dealers, they now go into Rolex. They get the sellers themselves get 10 to 15% more. So let's say, $10,000 watch, they're now getting 11.5, where we would pay them 9, 10, maybe, and Rolex still maintains that 30% above price. So they're making money one way or another.
You think they're going to be able to scoop up the selling market?
Yes.
You think that they're going to draw, that there's a risk to your supply?
There's an opportunity for them to do that. They're going to make money one way or another.
It's an amazing, it's an important thought and a real risk. If that's what they decide to do. The other thing about it is you've got all of these Rolex experts in the ADs. If they were to start buying up the ADs and making them into, boutiques, there's a whole bunch of other people that are potentially entering the market, people that leave from the boutiques. Yeah. If the deal's not right, they may decide, I'm not doing this. This is a shakeup.
I mean, look, the secondary market will always be there. It's not going anywhere. I'm not worried about our company. I'm not worried about, our business. Rolex does play a big part in our volume, but if tomorrow it didn't, we would still survive. We would still be here.
Of course. And of course. And you would, and the margins may get squeezed further on Rolex. And that's what it is. But, you guys you don't have that concentration risk. You just happen to sell a lot of Rolex because that's what moves. That's what people want.
Correct. So if they take that off the market, again, there's still going to be competition. People will still be buying and selling watches in the secondary market. So I don't think this move will actually, a lot of people are saying, oh, gray market is dead. I don't think this move is going to do anything to the gray market or to the secondary, pre-owned watch market. Especially, look, Rolex, again, I don't know the exact percentage of that market that Rolex takes up. Let's just, for shits and giggles, assume it's 30%. The other 70% is built up with Patek, Audemars Piguet, Richard Mille, Breitling, Omega, anything else.
Vacheron, everybody.
Everything else, Fine, take out Rolex, sure. Our sales would be less, but our profit would be higher because the profit margins are not in Rolex.
You're already getting squeezed on the profit margins because there's already so much competition there and there's already so much demand. So the sellers are already selling for top dollar.
Correct.
Right?
Let's talk about some potential future plans of new Bucherer entity, or I guess the existing Bucherer entity. If they're going to continue operating independently, does that mean they wake up on Monday and they're like, yo, let's go open up some more stores? We now need to open up 100 new stores all over America.
In terms of right now, before the acquisition or following the acquisition?
We're getting all this press. Nobody has ever heard of us. Now people are hearing about us. Now they know we're associated with Rolex. We're operating independently. Rolex has nothing to say about this. Let's raise money. Let's open up new locations.
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong potential. I would think that Rolex is going to continue to do what it. I mean, I do think they're going to act with prudence. There's definitely a potential, but once they take over, the likelihood of a brand that's that careful, like Rolex, being that careful to just be like, go open up 100 new locations, given the current economic environment, I don't see I think it's highly unlikely. I'd put my money against that.
Yeah, but I do think that there's going to be a new, I guess, process where they might ultimately just halt any new authorized dealer applications.
So that's the real question. Like, what's gonna change in the terms with them and their existing third-party authorized dealers? Are they going to be adding on new third-party authorized dealers? Why would they?
Why not just open up a Bucherer store?
It wouldn't make any. Well, and that's the conflict, and that's why I think they're going to have a really hard time squaring this with their current retailers because it just doesn't. They can say whatever they want. Yeah. They can make whatever promises they want. But dollars and cents speak, and when it's a question, I guess it's a trust. So they are not They're not purely profit motivated.
I wanted to ask about it. What part does that play? They're a nonprofit.
They don't have to. Well, they don't have shareholders. Okay, what does it mean? It means that they don't have shareholders for which they need to achieve the highest return, irrespective of other things. So, first of all, any public company is going to be acting sort of on a quarterly basis, on a reporting basis. They shouldn't, I think, in theory, but most of them will because of the way that it hits their stock price and the way that even though stock price doesn't have a direct relationship with how your company's able to perform today, it only has an impact on how much you're able to raise in the future and potentially on whether or not you're going to default on debt. But at the end of the day, most public companies are reacting to things based on their stock price. Rolex doesn't have to do that. If Rolex Rolex doesn't need to make more money this year than it did last year necessarily. Whereas almost all companies do that have shareholders. So they are, and we've seen this, and that's what's behind a lot of Rolex's actions in the past, like over the last 4 years when they've been the biggest, the most in-demand brand that, they haven't been increasing production. They don't need to. It's like otherwise shareholders would be knocking down the door saying, sell more watches. Are you crazy?
Of course. But they are building this new $1 billion factory, which is supposedly going to allow manufacturing, of more watches.
I mean, it's interesting. And if we think about that, they also did a press release. They did that press release like last year where they were like, we will not sacrifice. We will not create more watches. I guess they're not lying if they build that factory and they're able to hire and train more competent people to do it, then they could produce more watches without sacrificing quality. But
But that would really flood the market with additional models or additional, supply, which would drive down prices.
for sure, yeah, and I guess it's like I don't. It's hard to know where demand really is right now. Like demand's not where it was last year, not where it was 2 years ago, but
Correct. But so Roman did a video yesterday talking about this whole subject and kept referring back to when he first started. I mean, you could pretty much buy any Rolex under retail except for like certain Daytona models. Are we going back there? I mean, think about it. Like, you're a nonprofit. In essence, you're a charity. You're not in it for the money, so why not bring prices back down to retail at least? They don't care about making profits, right?
They do. Well, they care about their brand.
They care about the brand.
They care about the brand. So they care about being able to continue paying, huge sponsors and they care about being in golf. They care about being in yachting. They care about that stuff. That's very expensive stuff for them to do. They care about their employees, their stakeholders. Yeah. I think they care about their fans, their consumers. And so like there is a drive there. I guess like profit isn't the end all be all for them, but it just, I guess going back to the point that I was trying to make before, they're risking a very good thing,
which is what?
They're risking what they have. They're risking what they have right now. They may have
public trust or what?
Yeah, like the trust from their clients, for sure. Right? There's this tension that's created. People kind of hate. A lot of people hate on Rolex. They hate on the system. They hate on the ADs. If there's still Rolex is insulated from that to some degree because of its AD network that's between them. There's a buffer there. Yeah. People hate ADs. People don't hate Rolex.
Correct. So now you're saying if they're going into a Bucherer store, it's no longer really an AD. Now it's a company store, and you're still telling me that there's a wait list, and you might call me back in 3 years to get the Daytona that I asked for.
Sure. And it's
now
not
I hate
the AD
you.
who's deciding on the allocation.
Yeah.
It's now Rolex itself. I mean, technically,
but this might be a move in, again, think about it, like, when they tell you, when you're a business, what's your most important asset? It's your customer. So why wouldn't you do everything you possibly can to make your product more available, and more reasonably priced for the customer, especially if you're operating as a trust or as a nonprofit? You're not trying to please any shareholders. You want your customers to love you, to appreciate you, and to also have access to your product.
Yeah.
Which means they would raise production, which would drop prices naturally, and their products would be available in their stores, at least at the retail price, hopefully for them, not below it, but yeah.
I mean, listen, there's cycles. You guys have been in this game, like Roman's been in this game a really long time. He's seen it before, right? There's gonna be ebbs and flows depending on what happens in the economy. We're already seeing a softening, but you still can't walk into an AD right now and ask for a no date and walk out, generally speaking.
You can't.
Right? It's like you're talking about. It's still quite tight. So yeah, I mean, I think the difficult thing for me to square is that if Rolex has a choice to sell it to themselves, to sell it through themselves or through someone else, they're always going to be like. It would just make sense.
Who would be in charge of this? Like, who's the person sitting there? Like, I'm going to allocate one to you. 2 to me. Like, is it one person? Is it like a department? Is it, an algorithm? Like, I wonder how this would work, because there's no way for this to be fair. If it's a person.
There's no way for it to be fair. It's an inherent conflict of interest, and whatever Rolex says, it's going to exist, and that's, that's a problem. I don't know how they're going to square it. It's an issue. One other crazy thing that one of my buddies mentioned to me was all of the data. Talking about like the other brands.
Oh,
by buying the retailer, they get access to all of the sales data for LVMH, for the Richemont brands. They're going to get their hands on stuff that they could have only dreamed of before.
Oh my God.
They would have had like some semblance of an idea of how this stuff works from talking to people. They're going to get their hands on the database with the information, and that they're going to have all the margins are going to be exposed to them, all of the processes, all the procedures,
everything.
Really everything. Is major competitive risk to the
Didn't
other
even
players
think of
in
that.
that store. I don't know that that's been mentioned, but call out to Andy for that one.
That's actually serious. I didn't even think
Serious
about it.
business.
And yeah. Wow.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. It's a crazy point.
Very interesting.
For
This is
sure.
some interesting shit. Like this is gonna be really interesting to follow. Now, again, I don't assume that anything is gonna happen quickly.
We can
Given
assume it won't.
Rolexes, yeah. Couple years, it's gonna move slowly. Things are going to change. I really do believe that the party that's going to hurt most is going to be the smaller, authorized dealers. I'm not really sure. Okay, so Watches of Switzerland stock is down. They have 200 locations or 200 showrooms. What's the fear there? Is it, again, the allocation bias or something else?
Well, I think the fear is the conflict that the allocation bias. What else? I mean, well, the allocation bias, like the fact that for the first time their biggest supplier is now going direct to consumer. I mean, it's just, and that's a surefire way for them to fail. And it's kind of sad because this kind of move, like, I don't know whether or not there are, any legal implications, but like, this would be a really good, really, really good time to go swoop up Watches of Switzerland at a 30% discount.
Absolutely.
You want to talk about expanding? Like,
it's time for a hostile takeover. Let's start buying up their stock. Their stock is down 30%.
Yeah.
Start buying.
I mean, yeah, I'd have to think that one through. But it is, yeah. I mean, it's not a good position. It's not a good position for them to. It's really not a good position for them to be in.
Like, what options do they have now to strengthen their position? Really, it's just to buddy up with other brands more. Just to become bigger, protect bigger.
Yes, you would reduce your concentration. You reduce your concentration risk, right? And they should be thinking about that. They should have been thinking about that. They would have been thinking about that every time that they had a contract negotiation with Rolex on their terms, because they've always had that concentration risk. Rolex decides to send you 50% fewer watches. That's going to hit your sales.
Yeah,
50%. It's a problem.
This, obviously, we talked about how this is a way for them to make more money without really doing anything. They're not raising MSRP. They're not cutting off their authorized dealers. They're not reducing their margin there. So they're just, gaining that additional 30, 40% that they would have, lost if they gave it to an authorized dealer.
On maybe 10% of their sales.
Yes.
Right? Like, let's say if it's 3% of the stores, let's say it's 10% of the sales, then they're going to make an extra 30 to 40% top line on those sales. Yeah. Don't know what Bucherer's operating margin, like what their operating costs are, what their actual margins are. So not like unclear to say, if it's going to be, let's say they're going to make half of that, 15% extra on.
Sorry, going back to the point where they have so much access now to their, rival, brands. Wouldn't it be wise of those brands to immediately pull out of Bucherer?
I mean, it'd be wise of those brands to be reviewing their contracts to figure out, whether there were rules in there about, this. I mean, oftentimes when you have contracts, there's something called a change of control provision, and that'll give, a party the ability to get out of the contract, to terminate the contract, or, do any number of things on the basis that ownership has changed. So there may be a clause.
I'm sure they have a clause in there that we could terminate your agreement at any given time, as we choose.
Rolex would, but I'm actually talking about like the brands. Like, well, okay, so any of the brands working with Bucherer are going to have the power. So it's probably like the deals are going to be in their favor. Yeah. They will likely in those contracts have a change of control provision that says, Bucherer, if you get acquired by someone else, we can elect to terminate this deal. Whatever. That's going to be in there, but also, I mean, to be fair, Omega or any of these huge brands likely with Bucherer has a term in there anyway that just says that they can, get out.
So like, why wouldn't they?
Because it just depends on how much of their sales are being pushed through these doors.
You assume again, if it's only 100 stores. I'm assuming, okay, so Rolex is an AD in 50 of those stores or whatever number, which means that Patek, AP, they also don't have 100% of those stores. Let's assume each one of those brands might also have 50%, coverage. it can't.
You may not want to take, you don't want to take a hit on 4%, 5% of your sales. You don't, maybe it's, even if it's
in exchange for your data.
But the data doesn't go away. The data is historic. The contracts
historic
are there.
data you have, but future data.
Them. Sure. Yeah. I mean, if Rolex gets access to everything from before, they're going to learn enough that they're probably frothing at the mouths if they care about it. If, in the future, they're probably going to be putting in protections. They're probably going to be a little bit more careful about what they're sharing.
Yeah, but how fucking weird is that? I'm Audemars Piguet. Every watch that you sell, I am now paying you Rolex, 30, 40%. Like, I am making you richer by allowing you to sell my watches at your locations. I am empowering my competitor.
100%. It shakes shit up. It's a big fucking deal.
Things are really, really going to get interesting with this.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to cover on this? Anything else? Any points that we didn't bring up to talk about?
I think there's a lot more to come. But
what do you think? What do you think is happening, or what do you think is going to happen? For the end consumer, or you think prices so I just saw something. Patek and AP prices, are going to have like a rally, and I'm like, why? What would make those prices go up?
Patek and AP prices are going to have a rally. Okay, so yeah, I'd like to explore that one. We can find out. Maybe someone can leave it in the comments. From a pricing perspective, I mean, pricing, at least what I learned in my MBA, simply comes down to willingness to pay. What is a customer willing to pay? As long as a customer is willing to pay more than retail, prices aren't going down anytime soon. So that's it. Right now, what's a sub going aftermarket? What's the premium on a Submariner?
Average amount at 13 grand.
Okay.
12.5, not for a brand new one, but.
Okay. Yeah. So 12.5%. People are still willing to pay 12.5% over retail for a used version of something that's sold new.
Yeah. When
that changes, prices will go down. Right. That's it. I mean, right, Rolex could raise prices, but I don't think it's not in their, they have an ability to make more money without raising prices. I think they're going to do that first.
Yeah, they definitely will. This topic is super interesting, and I'm really, really excited to see what's going to happen going forward. Shane, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk to me about this. You've been an amazing guest host, and this is a good topic for us to talk about. So maybe we'll do more of these about other topics. I haven't done a podcast episode in months trying to work on this goddamn website that we're launching together. So once we get that project done, I'll get back to podcasting, and I will definitely have you on again in the future. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great day. To our viewers, if you like this episode, if you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe, comment, like, share, do all the good things that we need to grow. And I will see you next time on a Gray Market Podcast.
Thanks so much.
Take care.